So as you can see, probably can see, we're having technical difficulties here today, and we know that God is in the midst, and that this service continues to unfold most divinely and most perfectly. Thank you for the beautiful prayer, Fran. Thank you very much. We continue to breathe in and to breathe out. As we move into this new month of July, and in the month of July, we usually think of freedom, the quality of freedom. And the theme for the month of July is the freedom to be free. The freedom to be free. And you know, we have to have the freedom to be free. We can't always allow ourselves to be free for some reason. So we have to have the freedom to be free. Freedom means to be without restriction, to think as one pleases, to act as one pleases, to live as one pleases, without restraint, so long as it's not imposing or impinging on someone else's rights. Ernest Holmes says the real meaning of freedom is that we are created in the image of perfection, and that we are left alone to make that discovery for ourselves. That the real meaning of freedom is that we are created in the image of perfection, and we are let alone to make that discovery for ourselves. And that freedom is the birthright of every soul. It is our birthright to be free. And the only thing that impinges on that is how we perceive our freedom, how we act, how we react, how we respond in the world. And that's because we are aware of the fact that freedom comes from within. Freedom comes from within, so it comes from within out. And it is the way that we respond, the way that we react, the way that we live our lives, the way that we make choices that gives us the freedom that we have. And so this morning, just in alignment with freedom, my topic today is when things fall apart. And I'm chuckling because we're all laughing when things fall apart. That's the topic for today. When things fall apart. And you know, there are a lot of other phrases that can be used for when things fall apart. But the one that we're going to use today is when things fall apart. And when things fall apart, our first response usually is to want to freak out. It's just freak out. And sometimes we do. And you know, we just have to keep breathing and keep breathing when things fall apart, and just keep moving forward, keep putting one foot in front of the other, and recognize that it's all a part of life. It's all a part of going through our daily lives, our daily being, our daily doing, whatever it is. That life is always in transition. Life is always transitory. Things are never the same. Things are never the way we thought they were going to be. Things are never the way we want them to be sometimes. We get into that place, and that's when things seem to fall apart. And that's when we seem to fall apart as a result of things not going the way we wanted, or not having the things we want, or not having the life we want, or not being able to hold on to whatever our expectations were. When things fall apart, that's what happens. That's how we feel. And so what we have to do is to come into the realization and the awareness that even when things fall apart, God is in the midst of everything. God is in the midst of everything, even though we don't see it, even though we don't know it, even though we don't feel it, even though we don't believe it sometimes. As things fall apart, God is in the midst of everything. And so I invite you to just take a breath with me right now as we just move into this place of center. We just move into this place of just knowing that this service continues to unfold most divinely and most perfectly, because God is in the midst. God is guiding. God is directing. God is right here, right where we are. And you know, things fall apart in so many different ways in our lives. It can be as a result of a loss of a job. It can be a result of a loss of a relationship. It can be a death. It can be illness, our own illness. It can be financial difficulties, whatever the case may be. When things aren't going well and all of a sudden it seems like the bottom falls out. That's when things fall apart. That's when we call That's what we call falling apart, the falling apart of things, the way that life, the way that we've known it, life the way that it has always been, life the way we expected it to be, or situations the way we expected them to be. And those things can really throw us off our center. Those things can really throw us just out of kilter. And we have to come to realize that we just take a breath and just move back into that place of knowing that no matter what's going on, there's that power and that presence that is in the midst of everything. There's that power and there's that presence that is guiding and directing everything. There's that power and that presence that already has a divine plan for everything, just as that presence has a divine plan for this service here today. And it is unfolding most divinely and most perfectly, and we just allow ourselves to go with it. We allow ourselves to be with it. We allow ourselves to be in the flow of it. And that's what we have to learn to do when things fall apart. If we just freak out, then what? You know, our first response is to want to either push back off on it, resist it, or to just crumble in the face of it, or to just stop and do nothing. You know, stop and do nothing, just resist. That's all resistance. And that's not what we can do always. That's what we really shouldn't do when things start to fall apart. What we have to learn to do is to be with it. What we have to learn to do is to go with the flow. What we have to learn to do is to even in the midst of what appears to be chaos, even in the midst of what appears to be total chaos, we have to learn to just continue to put one foot in front of the other, continue to do what's before us to do. And that's what we do. We do what is before us to do. We do what is before us to do. We do what is before us to do, and we do that over and over and over again. And that's what's called taking one step after another step after another step. And that's how we manage to make it through when things fall apart. When things fall apart. Michael Beckwith says in his book, Spiritual Liberation, that we have not lost our inner ability to handle problems as they come up. We've lost our awareness of the ability because we got hooked into the problem. We got hooked into the problem. And when we don't get hooked into the problem, we can then turn to our inner ability to continue to move forward, to continue to live our lives, to continue to go through whatever it is that's before us to do when we are hooked into the solution. And the solution is always that power and that presence that is always with us, that power and that presence that always knows exactly what to do, exactly how to do it, exactly when to do it. And all we need to do is just take a breath and step back. Take a breath and step back. You know, as I said, that falling apart in our lives happens when sudden change comes. And sometimes the change doesn't have to be sudden. It's just big changes that come in our lives. We're going through falling apart, it seems, in our country today. We are dealing with two deadly viruses, COVID-19 and racial injustice. They're both deadly viruses that are infecting our society, that are infecting all around us. You see the infection all around us. But you know, in the midst of both of them, in the midst of everything, God is. God is. And things fall apart, as Pema Chodron say in her book, When Things Fall Apart and then they come together. And then they fall apart again, and then they come together. And then they fall apart again, and then they come together. There's nothing that is permanent. There's nothing that is permanent. Things are always falling apart, and things are always coming together. Things are always falling apart, and things are always coming together. And what there is for us to do is to open our hearts in the meantime, open our minds, open our entire being, to be in tune with the divine, to be in tune with that perfection that always is, to be in tune with that guidance and that direction that is always available to us. That's where we have to be. Have to be in that place of knowing that all indeed is well, always, no matter what's going on, no matter what the appearances may be. We have to know that all indeed is well. All indeed is well. Everything is unfolding perfectly. Let's take a breath together. You know, I was reminded as I was preparing this morning, as I was driving here, I was reminded of a time that I felt that things had just really falling apart. It had been many times, but this one time came to mind as I was driving here, that things had really fallen apart in my life. When I decided to go from being a full-time lawyer, practicing law full-time, to being a full-time minister, full-time. And so I moved from Ohio to California, and to a place I had never lived before, to a place where I knew one person, to left my family behind. Instead of moving to Los Angeles, where I had lived before and a place that I loved, I moved to Northern California, a place that I was not that fond of, that area of Northern California. It wasn't anything like Southern California. But I just picked up and I just moved, and I said, I'm going to do ministry full time, and this is how it's going to be. And so I moved to Santa Cruz, and you know what? The people there were wonderful. The people there were loving. The people there really cared about me. However, it was like I was living in two different worlds. I was straddling two different worlds. I had gone from a world of being around all lawyers most of the time to now being around all spiritual people most of the times. And I had been a minister for almost 15 years by that time. And I had Wednesday night service. I had clients. I had traveled around. I had been speaking around at different churches. But I had never done ministry full time. In the daytime, I was a lawyer. In the evenings, I was a minister. And on Sundays and on Wednesday evening, because I had the Wednesday evening service. But here I was now, leaving law behind altogether and doing ministry full time. I felt like I was living in two different worlds. I felt like I didn't know how to make the transition from being Attorney McCreary to being Rev.Sherry. I thought it would be easy. I never even thought about, because I was the same person. However, once I got into that position, I recognized that I didn't even speak the same language, or the people that I was dealing with didn't speak the same language that I did. It was like I was a stranger in a strange land. It was like I had come to a foreign country, because all of a sudden, I seemed to have lost my bearings. I didn't know, nothing was familiar to me. And when I came around, I wasn't familiar to the people that I was dealing with. I spoke a language that was totally different. I spoke legalese. They didn't get that. And I think I still speak it sometimes. My staff is nodding in the back. I speak legalese. And people totally either don't get it, or they wonder what on earth I'm talking about. And that's how I felt once I moved to California the second time. And it was so, things were nothing like I expected them to be. Yet, I couldn't go back to where I'd been. But I was in this strange place, and it seems like the bottom had fallen out. And it was really, really a difficult time. It was really, really a difficult time. As I said, it felt like I was straddling two worlds. I was trying to move from left brain to right brain and back and forth, and it just wasn't working. It was one of the most difficult times I've had in my life, because the bottom, when the bottom falls out, and there's nothing for us to hold on to, there's nothing for us to grasp, then it's pretty scary. It feels pretty scary, because there was a time that I felt so alone because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to speak that language. They didn't know how to speak my language. The common language that we had was love. Loved. People loved me. I loved them. We didn't understand each other initially. But that was a time that things seemed to have fallen apart. And I went through a period of depression. I went through a period of dealing with pain. I went through a period of dealing with the grief. I went through a period of dealing with a lot of issues, because I had gotten hooked into the problem, and I kept forgetting the solution. I had to keep coming back. I had to keep returning unto God. I had to keep coming back, and I had to realize I needed to let go. I needed to let go. I needed to surrender. I needed to surrender to where I was. I needed to surrender to this situation where it seemed that everything had fallen apart. And so that's what I'm saying to us today. Whatever is going on in your individual life, no matter what it is, no matter how small, no matter how big, no matter how devastating, we can't rail against it. We can't fight it. We have to be willing to surrender to it. To surrender to it, to be with it, to be in it, to be in the grief, to be in the fear, to be in the anger, to be in the shame, to be in the blame, to be in whatever it is that we're feeling. We have to be willing to surrender to it. And when we surrender to it, then we can allow that heart opening to happen. We can allow spirit to start to work. We can allow the guidance to come. We can allow the direction to come. We can allow healing to begin to happen for us. But so long as we are fighting it, so long as we are resisting it, so long as we are ignoring it, so long as we are pretending it isn't happening, so long as we are using some type of substitution so that we don't feel it, whether it's some substance or some alcohol or some food or some sex or some whatever the case may be, whatever it is that may be your drug of choice, let it go. Let it go, because all we are doing is delaying the inevitable. We still got to deal with it at some point, in some way. And so when we can surrender to the situation, when we can surrender to the loss, when we can surrender to the change, when we can surrender to the transition, when we can surrender to the awareness that life is impermanent, that there's impermanence throughout our lives, and that the only thing that is permanent is God. The only thing that is permanent is that it is the Creator. The only thing that is permanent is that infinite principle. The only thing that is permanent is the all that is. And that's what we want to move into alignment with always. That's what we want to move into alignment with always. To remember who we are. To remember who we are. This is a time that we have to come face to face with ourselves. When things fall apart, we have to come face to face with ourselves. Who are we? Who am I? What do I believe? How do I want to live? How do I want to be? That's what's happening right now in our society, in our country. We have come face to face with ourselves. This country has come face to face with itself. We're all coming face to face with ourselves. And so as we do this, it seems like things are falling apart, and here we sit. Here we sit with COVID-19, and we have to come, and we have to sit a lot because of that, and it gives us an opportunity to come face to face with who we are. It gives us an opportunity to decide whether we're going to move forward or whether we're just going to sit still, or whether we're going to try to go backward, or just what we're going to do. How are we going to be in the world? And that's the question that comes up when things fall apart. And that's what happens when we seem to be straddling two worlds, because the one world is the world we are currently living in, and the other world is the world we are being birthed into. The world we are being birthed into, or that is being birthed into our awareness. I think it's three worlds: the world we used to be in, and the world we are currently in, and the one we're being birthed into. And we're trying to straddle with two legs, three worlds. And that doesn't work. That doesn't work at all. And so what we have to come to realize is that if we surrender right here and right now, surrender the fight, surrender the flight, surrender the fight, surrender the flight, and just be where we are. Walk through the pain. Walk through the change, walk through the transition, walk through it all, and know that we never walk alone, that we never walk alone, that we're always walking in the love of God. We're always walking in the love of God, because God is always right where we are, always guiding us, always directing us, always showing us the way. If we can just remember to return unto God, always, always. And so I invite you today to whatever is going on, if things seem to be falling apart in your life, or if it seems that things have fallen apart in your life, take a deep breath and just surrender. Just be where you are. Just give up the fight. Surrender, and then allow yourself to be guided. Allow yourself to be directed. Allow yourself to be shown the way. Allow yourself to be in a place of just releasing and letting go of all that stuff that you may be holding on to. All that stuff that you may have been holding on to for a long time. All the expectations, all the hope for change, all the hope that things would be different, all the hope that you could go back to the way things used to be. Let all that go. Let all that go and just be here now. Be here now. Surrender and be here now. That's what I had to learn to do when I moved to California the last time. I had to learn to be there right then. Be here now was what I had to learn to do. And before I finally got to that place, I moved back to Ohio. And I stayed for a year, and then I moved back to California again. And in that second moving, I was in a place where I was allowing myself to be where I was. I was allowing myself to be who I was. Because throughout those couple of years that I was doing all that moving across country, I was coming to receive the answers and the responses to the questions, who am I? Who am I? How do I want my life to be? What do I want to be? How do I want to be? What do I want my life to look like? I could go back to practicing law. I could be a full-time minister. What do I want? What is it that Spirit is calling me to do? And you know what Pema Chodron says, that what looks like the end is really just the beginning of a great adventure. What looks like the end just may be the beginning of a great adventure. And for me, making that move out there and everything being the bottom falling out seemed like the end, but it was really the beginning of a great adventure. That's the adventure that brought me here. That was the beginning of the adventure that brought me here, because if I had still been practicing law, I would not have come to Arizona. But ministry brought me here. And so that's what we have to look at, these kinds of things, when we are looking at situations in our lives where things have fallen apart. In addition to surrendering, when we move into that place, here's another spiritual practice I want to recommend for you. The practice of noticing. The practice of noticing. Noticing. Noticing means just paying attention. Paying attention to not what somebody else is doing. Of course, we're always observing. That's observing what somebody else is doing. But noticing what's happening with each one of us. Noticing what's happening. What are you thinking? How are you feeling? What are you doing? What's your behavior? And the beauty of noticing, the reason it is such a profound practice is because we're noticing without judgment. We're noticing without trying to change anything. We're noticing what we're thinking without criticizing ourselves. We're noticing what we're saying without trying to take it back. We're noticing without feeling guilty. We're just noticing. And the quickest way to heal a behavior, or for a behavior to fall off, is to start to notice it. Start to notice it. If we just start to notice, and give you an example, if you were sitting in your house and you looked out the window and you saw a bird flying, you would just be noticing that, oh, there goes a bird. Oh, there goes the wind is blowing. I see the leaves on the trees are blowing. Oh, there goes a car down the street. Oh, I hear horns blowing. That's noticing. Noticing our own behavior the same way. When we are feeling sad, just notice I'm feeling really sad. Or when we're feeling angry, I'm noticing that. When we're saying things that we don't really believe or that we don't really mean, or being really mean, noticing that. Just noticing. If you're overeating or overdrinking or drugging or whatever the case may be, noticing that. Not pointing the finger at yourself and saying that you always or you never, those are judgment words, but just noticing. Just noticing, oh, I'm eating again. Oh, I'm drinking my 6th glass of whatever now. Not trying to stop it, just noticing when you're doing it. And the more awareness, the more that we can shine the light of awareness on something, that's how change happens, when we have an awareness of it. We cannot change what we're not aware of. And so noticing, as I said, is a profound spiritual practice, and I invite you to start that. As you go through this time of feeling like things have fallen apart, just noticing. Noticing when you're suppressing your tears. Noticing when you're suppressing your anger. Noticing when you're letting it out. Just paying attention, just noticing. Taking a deep breath and noticing. Noticing is one of the greatest acts of loving kindness that we can give to ourselves. One of the greatest acts of loving kindness that we can give to ourselves. It's one of the greatest acts of loving kindness that we can give to ourselves, because we aren't trying to change ourselves. We aren't trying to beat up on ourselves. We aren't criticizing ourselves. We aren't judging ourselves. We aren't feeling guilty. We're just noticing. We're just noticing. And what I want you to notice is how your noticing of it, your awareness of it, the behavior will begin to fall off. Whatever it is, the way of thinking will begin to fall off. If it's something that is not serving you, if it's not for your highest and best, it will begin to fall off. It will begin to shift. It will begin to change. It's a profound practice that I invite you to engage in noticing. Noticing the loving kindness, noticing. That's where compassion is, in our noticing. And then the third thing I want you to do is to look at the gift. Where's the gift in this falling apart? Where's the gift in this falling apart? Because when things fall apart and they come together again, and they fall apart and they come together again, there's a spaciousness. There's a spaciousness that begins to happen. There's a spaciousness that begins to happen because our hearts begin to open, and that's how healing starts to happen. As our hearts begin to open, we begin to become more tolerant, we become more aware, we become more open, we become more available, we become more reliant on the all that is. And that's where the gift is. And so I invite you to begin to look at where's the gift in this. That we thought was so terrible, that we thought was the end of our lives, and it was the end of our lives as we knew it to be. That we thought was so awful, so terrible, we began to see the gift in it. Wow, what a gift it was that I moved to California that last time, and that things didn't work out the way I thought they were going to. But it helped me to learn to let go of expectations. It helped me to let go of wanting things to be my way. It helped me to let go of resisting. It helped me to let go of so many things. That was a gift in that for me, and it brought me here. It brought me here. And so I'm inviting all of you to look for the gift in the falling apart. Look for the gift in the falling apart. And put one foot in front of the other. One foot in front of the other. One foot in front of the other. And remembering to breathe. Remembering to take a deep, deep breath. Remembering to keep your spiritual seatbelts fastened. Keep your seatbelts fastened. We have to keep our seatbelts fastened during this time. We have to do our spiritual practice. We have to do our meditation. We have to do our prayer work. We have to do our chanting. We have to do whatever it is, yoga, whatever it is we do, whatever our spiritual practice is. We have to do these things religiously, constantly, consistently, without fail. This is what the spiritual seatbelt looks like. And we have to do that. That's how healing happens in our lives. That's how healing happens, and that's how we get to that place where we begin to live a life of wholeness. We begin to live a life of peace. That's where freedom comes from, because we recognize we have the freedom of choice. We can choose a different life. Yes, this looks like the pits right now because this isn't working. This looks like the pits right now because I'm experiencing this. This looks like the pit right now because the bottom has fallen out. And I can choose to move in a different direction. I can choose to continue to move forward. I can choose to do something different. I can choose to live my life fully and completely. I can choose to allow things to come back together. I can choose to allow things to come back together in God's time, in God's way, knowing indeed that all is well. And so I invite you to just take a breath now as we just move into that place of just allowing things. When things fall apart, just allow them to be. Allow yourself to be with it. Allow yourself to say, yes, yes, God's got this. Yes, God's in the midst of this. No, this doesn't feel good. And God's got this. God's got this, and I'm going to trust God as I move forward. As I move forward in my life, as I move forward in my day, as I move forward in this moment. Because this moment is all that we have. And so I invite you to just take a breath now. Let's just turn within for prayer. And so we just move into that place of just knowing and sensing and feeling the presence of God right here, right now, right where we are. Knowing that this presence of God is the only presence that is. The only life that is, the only breath that is, the only activity that is God. God is that within which we live and we move and we have our being. God is the knower of all. The knower of all, the seer of all. God is all. And this allness that is God is my life. This allness that is God is the life of us all. There's nothing that can separate us. Nothing that can separate us from this allness and this fullness that is God. And so just knowing this truth of my oneness with the one, I speak my word in this moment for all of us. For the wholeness that is, for the unity that is, for the peace that is, for the harmony that is, for the oneness that is. And that despite any appearance to the contrary, despite any appearance to the fact that things may be falling apart, we stand in the knowing that God is always wholeness itself. God is always unity itself. God is always the answer to whatever the situation may be, whatever the problem may be, whatever the question may be. And so we return over and over again to that answer. And so this word goes out to anyone needing a prayer this day. If there's anyone that you're holding in prayer this day, you'd like to speak their name silently or aloud, you may speak them now. And so for all those whose names are spoken here this day, I know that God is right where each of them is, blessing and keeping them. For all those who have been affected by COVID-19, families impacted, loss of a loved one, the illness, experiencing the illness itself, I know that God is in the midst. The healing presence of God is in the midst right now. Right now. All those who are affected by unrest, injustice, loss of any kind, God is in the midst of everything. Every situation and circumstance, God is in the midst. And so I simply say thank you, Father, Mother God. Thank you, Divine Presence. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I simply allow it to be. And so it is.